3 Ukrainian drones sliced through Russian airspace when their world went black. GPS vanished. Satellites disappeared. Navigation screens died. 6 drones had crossed into Russia hunting the most dangerous cargo imaginable, a military train stretching 38 cars long, packed with enough explosives to obliterate entire city blocks. But survival wasn't in the mission plan. Russian electronic warfare systems had already hijacked their signals, stolen their navigation, and blinded every sensor. These weren't civilian drones that crash when signals fail. The UJ-26 Beavers carried one secret weapon the Russians never anticipated. Before reaching that ammunition train, they needed to eliminate Russia's watchful eyes, a single electrical transformer. Miss this target and every drone becomes practice for air defense gunners. Hit it perfectly and gain 20 precious minutes of darkness. Standing between the drones and that transformer was Russia's most dangerous electronic weapon, the Repellent 1 jamming system. Russian operators monitored their displays as the system transmitted fake commands, ordering Ukrainian drones to land immediately or return home. They watched. They waited. Nothing happened. The drone control signal shifted frequencies 1,000 times every second, like changing radio stations faster than human reaction. When Russians locked onto one frequency, the signal had already jumped elsewhere. This technology wasn't revolutionary. Frequency hopping was invented by Hollywood actress Hedy Lamarr during World War II. But proper implementation meant everything. The difference between drones that obey enemy commands and drones that ignore them completely. Meanwhile, half the formation disappeared from Russian radar. The southern group split away, following the Seversky Donets River Valley, adding 40 kilometers to their route but staying beneath the radar horizon. Ukrainian intelligence had mapped every radar installation along the border, discovering invisible corridors where terrain and physics created blind spots barely wide enough for drones to slip through. Flying these corridors meant threading needles at 180 kilometers per hour. Drift 1 kilometer left, and S-300 radar systems would detect them instantly. Veer 1 kilometer right, and mobile Tor M2 batteries would lock on. Pilots maintained exact altitude, rise above 150 feet, and they'd light up every Russian screen from the border to Moscow. The split formation strategy was already working. Russian radar operators spotted the northern group's heat signatures near the M4 highway and vectored their Panzer batteries to intercept. They couldn't know 3 more drones were ghosting through the river valley, exploiting fundamental physics. At 25 meters altitude, Russian radar could only see 20 kilometers to the horizon. The Earth itself concealed the southern group. Inside the Russian command center, operators faced an impossible decision. Commit mobile units north and leave the south exposed, or split defenses and risk both groups breaking through. They had seconds to choose. The final approach to Orlovsky required completely different tactics. The substation sat on high ground with clear sight lines, a 2UE killing zone where any aircraft would be exposed for over a kilometer. Ukrainian. Planners had identified what they hoped was a critical vulnerability, a cellular tower 800 meters southwest that might create an electromagnetic shadow. Exploit that blind spot and the path to Salsk and the ammunition train opens wide. But intelligence was 2 weeks old. If Russians had repositioned even one mobile radar unit, the drones would fly straight into an ambush. The lead pilot's hands gripped the controls as they approached the supposed blind spot. No way to verify if it still existed until they were already committed. Breaking cover in the final 400 meters meant Zu-23 gun crews would have less than 8 seconds to react. 8 seconds becomes an eternity when twin 23mm cannons are tracking you. One drone would go first, gambling its survival on outdated intelligence. They needed at least 3 drones to survive. 1 for the transformer, 2 more for what came next at Salsk. The northern group reached Orlovsky Power Station at 2:26 a.m. They had navigated 89 kilometers through Russian airspace using radar gate threading, exploiting gaps in radar coverage created by hills and terrain. Pilots mapped these blind spots beforehand, flying through them like threading needles between detection zones. The drones popped up over ridge lines for exactly 2.8 seconds, long enough to navigate but too brief for computers to classify them as valid targets before diving back into cover, playing peekaboo with radar systems all the way to their target. 2 Zu-23 anti-aircraft positions had been hastily deployed defending this critical infrastructure. Their crews were wide awake and hunting. The Zu-23 is Soviet-era hardware that refuses obsolescence. Dual 23mm automatic cannons spitting 2,000 rounds per minute with effective range of 2,500 meters. Against jets flying at 500 knots, they're nearly useless. Against drones traveling at 180 kilometers per hour, they're devastatingly effective, if the gunner can track the target. That's where the system's age revealed itself. Without radar guidance, gunners tracked targets using simple optical sights, like trying to shoot skeet in a thunderstorm with a sniper rifle. Through the lead Beaver's thermal camera, the pilot saw his objective clearly, a massive 330 kilovolt transformer the size of a small building. This single piece of equipment powered the regional grid. 6 air defense sites, including a Panzer battery to the south, drew electricity through this transformer. Destroy it and the entire air defense network in this sector collapses like a house of cards. Here's where things get interesting. 3 Beavers split into classic pincer formation 2 kilometers out. The lead drone climbed to 300 meters, deliberately making itself visible to draw fire. Both Zu-23 positions immediately swiveled toward it, their tracers creating a deadly ceiling. This was the plan. While gunners focused upward, the second and third drones hugged the ground, approaching from opposite sides. The second drone popped up just 100 meters from the fence, too close for Zu-23s to depress their barrels enough to engage. Gunners screamed in frustration as they cranked weapons down, but the drone had already cleared the fence and dove behind a maintenance building. The lead drone executed a barrel roll through tracer streams, its pilot using a technique learned from studying Russian gun camera footage. Zu-23 tracers flew in predictable patterns. Gunners always led targets by the same amount. By suddenly reversing direction mid-roll, the drone wrong-footed the gunner, causing him to overcorrect. The third drone used the confusion to streak in from the east, flying between 2 rows of high-voltage cables just 10 meters apart. This forced defenders to hold fire or risk hitting critical infrastructure. One touch of those lines would vaporize the drone in a plasma flash. As it cleared the towers, all 3 drones converged on the transformer from different angles. The first impact came from the low drone, striking the transformer's base and rupturing the cooling system. Its 20-kilogram KZ-6-shaped charge detonated on impact, creating a jet of molten copper that punched through steel like paper. The transformer's cooling oil met superheated metal and flashed into vapor, creating a fuel-air explosion that launched a fireball 60 meters skyward. 2 seconds later, the high drone dove straight down, its warhead punching through the top bushing. The third drone completed the intercept, hitting the control cabinet that might have isolated the damage. 3 strikes, 3 different angles, no escape. But the real destruction came in the next millisecond. With nowhere to go, 330,000 volts of electricity turned the air itself into a conductor. Massive arcs leaked between exposed components, each carrying the power of 1,000 lightning bolts. Circuit breakers tried to interrupt the flow, but damage was already spreading. Protective relays sensed the fault and disconnected substations in sequence, creating a cascade that plunged half the region into darkness. At military installations across the region, emergency generators coughed to life. But diesel engines need time to warm up and electronic systems need stable power. For the next 20 minutes, every radar screen would flicker, every computer would reboot, and every air defense system would be degraded, all while 3 Ukrainian drones were already racing toward that train. At 2:33 a.m., the Panzer S-1 crew at Salsk railway station watched their world collapse. The power surge from Orlovsky had cascaded through the grid like an electric tsunami, knocking out early warning radars, command centers, and communication links that fed them targeting data. The Panzer itself still had power. Its truck engine hummed steadily, but the system was designed to be one node in a network. Without supporting equipment, the crew wouldn't know about threats until they appeared on their own scope. giving them seconds instead of minutes to react. 3 kilometers south, the UJ-26 drones from the southern group approached through the storm. The southern group had traveled 155 miles using infrastructure masking, following railway lines where steel rails and overhead electrical wires created radar interference. Russian air defense doctrine assumed any low-altitude contact following rail lines was a maintenance vehicle or inspection drone. By maintaining exactly 122 meters altitude, just below the primary search beam of the P-18 spoon rest radar at Salsk, they remained invisible until the final approach. The timing was no accident. Ukrainian intelligence knew the Panzer crew conducted shift changes at 2:30 a.m. with a 10-minute handover brief where both crews gathered in the command vehicle. The drones arrived precisely during this window when reaction time would be slowest and confusion highest. They flew in loose formation, each pilot watching others through infrared cameras while monitoring degraded navigation. Without GPS, they relied on terrain features glimpsed through the rain. A river here, a road there, each landmark confirming they were still on course for the rail junction. But something was wrong. The lead pilot noticed it first. Railway lights that should have been invisible by now were completely dark. Either the power outage had spread further than planned, or the Russians had set a trap. The Panzer's gunner squinted at his rain-degraded thermal display, trying to separate real targets from phantom returns. The system's manual tracking mode allowed the turret to rotate at 30 degrees per second, barely adequate for crossing targets at 180 kilometers per hour. Without radar's precise calculations, he had to estimate range and lead angle by eye. Like an anti-aircraft gunner from World War II, blessed with modern missiles but cursed with degraded sensors. A flicker of heat caught his attention. Something moving between the trees. Too steady to be a bird, too hot to be ground clutter. He slewed the turret right, fighting sluggish hydraulics operating on reduced power. The crosshairs danced around the target as he tried to establish a stable track. The fire control computer, designed to process radar data in microseconds, labored for 3 full seconds to generate a firing solution based on degraded optical data. He squeezed the launch trigger. Nothing. Battery voltage had dropped below the minimum required for launch sequence. He switched to emergency mode, bypassing safety interlocks designed to prevent misfires. On the second attempt, a 57E6 missile roared from its launch tube, the exhaust flash temporarily blinding the thermal camera. But launching was only half the battle. Panzer missiles use command guidance, receiving course corrections throughout flight via radio data link. Without radar tracking both missile and target, the crew had to guide it manually using a joystick while watching through rain-obscured optics. Like trying to land a dart on a dartboard while riding a roller coaster in a thunderstorm. The missile's radio command link flickered and died after just 400 meters, another casualty of the power shortage. Without guidance, the 57E6 continued on its last commanded trajectory, passing harmlessly over the drone. When the Panzer missile went ballistic, 3 drones scattered like a school of fish evading a predator. The lead drone snap-rolled left and dove, presenting its smallest profile. The second jinked right while climbing, forcing any tracking gunner to choose between targets. The third maintained course, betting the crew would focus on maneuvering drones. This scattering confused tactic exploited a fundamental limitation of manual tracking. Humans can only focus on one target at a time. The thermal gunner involuntarily tracked the climbing drone, the most visually distinctive target. By the time he realized his mistake, the lead drone had already ducked behind a warehouse. $15 million of sophisticated air defense technology had been reduced to an expensive fireworks display. The crew commander screamed at his men to prepare another shot, but battery voltage had dropped below critical levels. The backup power system, designed to maintain the vehicle through brief power interruptions, was never intended for sustained combat operations. The drones regrouped 500 meters from the station, now approaching from 3 different compass points. They synchronized their final run using onboard clocks, no radio emissions to betray their coordination. Each would arrive at the target within 2 seconds of the others, overwhelming any remaining defenses. They could see the drones approaching on degraded displays but could do nothing to stop them. With defenders firing blind and their most sophisticated weapons reduced to scrap metal by a power outage, nothing stood between the drones and their primary target. At 2:41 a.m., 3 surviving UJ-26 Beavers converged on Salsk railway station from different angles. Their thermal cameras revealed a scene exceeding Ukrainian planners' wildest hopes. Stretched across multiple tracks sat a 38-car military train, its manifest reading like a shopping list for destruction, hundreds of artillery shells and rocket ammunition, plus diesel fuel just waiting for a spark. The 3 drones executed their attack with surgical precision, approaching an offset echelon, each flying at different altitudes, 50, 100, and 150 meters, forcing any defending gunner to constantly adjust elevation, slowing reaction time. The lead drone's infrared sensor painted the scene in stark contrasts of hot and cold. The locomotive's boiler glowed white-hot. Behind it, temperature variations revealed the train's deadly cargo. Fuel cars showed uniform heat signatures from 60,000 liters of diesel fuel each. Ammunition cars appeared cooler, their reinforced steel walls and careful ventilation designed to prevent exactly what was about to happen. The first drone began its terminal dive, aiming for the locomotive. The engineer had heard air raid sirens and tried desperately to move his train. But locomotives don't accelerate quickly. He could only watch through his cab window as drones approached at 50 meters per second. The timing was choreographed to maximize destruction. The first UJ-26 struck the locomotive's diesel engine compartment. Its shaped charge, designed to penetrate armor, found easy purchase in civilian steel. The jet of molten copper punched through the engine block, rupturing fuel lines and hydraulic systems. 38 cars of ammunition were now anchored to the tracks. 6 seconds later, the second drone found its mark, fuel car number 3, chosen specifically because it sat upwind of ammunition cars. The shaped charge carved through the steel shell as designed, but diesel fuel doesn't explode like Hollywood gasoline. Instead, 60,000 liters of fuel began pouring from the ruptured tank, flowing beneath the train like a burning river. The diesel found hot metal from the destroyed locomotive and ignited, creating a lake of fire that spread with terrifying speed. The third drone targeted an ammunition car near the train's center, positioned to spread secondary explosions in both directions. Each pilot watched the other's impacts through thermal cameras, adjusting aim points in real time. Its pilot knew exactly where to aim. Ukrainian intelligence had identified which cars carried the most sensitive cargo. The KZ-6 warhead penetrated reinforced walls, detonating among pallets of 152mm artillery shells. The initial blast was relatively small, contained by the car's armored construction, but started a process that couldn't be stopped. When the third drone made its run, burning fuel had already reached ammunition cars. Its warhead struck a car already heating up, guaranteeing the sympathetic detonation that would consume the entire train. 3 drones, 3 precise impacts, 1 unstoppable chain reaction. The Russian Ministry of Defense would claim to have shot down 22 Ukrainian drones that night, but live-stream videos from dozens of smartphones told the truth. The governor's admission that 2 fuel tanks and a locomotive were damaged seemed almost satirical against footage of the kilometer-wide smoke plume visible from space.